My name is Victor Canseco. I'm a principal at Sand Pebble, which is a project management firm that has been working with the Mastic-Moriches Shirley Community Library on ways to solve some of its building and facility issues. The work covered by this bond will totally renovate this facility, meaning all new HVAC, plumbing and electrical systems, all new internet and fire alarm, all new structural steel fire protection, and new insulation, additional insulation, and make it into a facility that can go forward for the next 50 years and still be current. "30 or 40 years ago, this building would have been, the insulation in this building was pretty consistent with other buildings of that vintage. But compared to today's standards, it is very much under-insulated. In addition, parts of this building have no insulation at all, and that's the way it was designed, believe it or not. So this building essentially has metal studs on the outside walls, and in between the metal studs is fiberglass insulation. It's very similar to the way your house is insulated, right? The difference is, in your house, this stud is made out of wood, which in itself is an insulator. In a commercial building, this stud is made out of metal. When there's metal, the outside and the inside are basically try to be the same temperature. So when it's 30 degrees outside, this metal stud tries to be 30 degrees. And of course, this side of the metal stud is inside the building. So you have a 30-degree piece of metal every 16 inches that is basically the temperature of the outside. This is what we call a thermal bridge, and it leads to large amounts of heat loss. But again, this is what people did in the 80s and 90s when they built buildings. This is a modern building, right? So you got the same brick on the outside, you got a space, but now you have a continuous level of insulation that covers all the metal studs. In this case, it's a cement block, but if this was a metal stud, the edges of the metal studs would all be covered with insulation. Then when you go on the inside, you have another layer of foam insulation, and then this insulation now protects this side of the metal stud from changes in temperature, and then you finally have your sheetrock. This, where the insulation is, was rated at about an R13, which is the way they rate insulation values. This is an R40, right? And so what's the difference? We have something today called thermal imaging, where we take photos of buildings, and the photo only reads the temperature. It doesn't read much else. And you can tell you where you're losing heat. This is a building built about the same time as the Mastic-Moriches Shirley Library. And if you can see, I don't know if it comes clearly, but the outside temperature on this day is 15 degrees. The side of the building is about 70. And that's because the heat from the inside is escaping through that wall so fast, escaping through this type of a wall so fast that the outside of the building is actually heated up from the lost heat from inside. This is a building that was insulated, this is a more modern building, insulated in the way I just showed you from this mock-up. And here, the outside temperature is 20, and the side of the building is very slightly higher than that. It's about 25. I love you. And that's the difference between insulation in the 80s and early 90s and insulation today. So if you think about going forward for 50 years, you really want your insulation to be of this standard and not of this standard, because this is outdated today, 35 years later. This building was built in two stages. The first stage was the westerly part where the main entrance was built in the 80s. And then they added on this easterly part in the 90s. Because the connection point between the two halves of the building created what the fire marshals would term a danger zone, they insisted that what they call a deluge system, which a deluge system is a series of about a half a dozen sprinkler heads that can create a wall of water to separate the old building from the new building. This building is equipped with a deluge system. A fire sprinkler system is a system of spraying water, as you know, throughout the entire building. This building is not equipped with a fire sprinkler system. The reason it's not is, according to the SED, State Education Department Building Code, fire sprinkler is not required in this building. It wasn't then, and I don't believe it is required now by SED. If this was done as a town of Brookhaven or a town of Islip or some other local municipality, it would definitely be a sprinkled building. But there's a difference in code requirements between the State Education Department and local building departments. Okay, included, there are three separate, there are two branches, and this existing building that would be financed by the bond. In this particular building, a full sprinkler system would be installed so that every square foot of the building had a modern fire alarm and sprinkler system. In addition, all of the steel in the building would be fireproofed, which means that it is sprayed with a fire-resistive coating that buys extra time before the steel will melt. In the event that something happened and the fire sprinkler system was not fast enough at putting out the fire, unlikely, but in case it was, it's a second level of protection where the steel is actually fireproofed. In the two branches, one in Moriches and one in Mastic Beach, the entire branch will be fire sprinkled, covered by a fire sprinkler system. Both of those branches about 7,000 feet. The main branch is 45,000 feet. So all three facilities would be covered by a fire sprinkler. The parking issue, right now in front of the main branch there are 37 parking spaces. Unfortunately, those spaces are shared by all the residents in the William Floyd district, because this is the only branch. After the work covered by the bond has been completed, there will be 3 locations, and that will certainly decrease the parking demand at the main branch, and some of that will be shared by the other 2 branches in Moriches and Mastic Beach. In addition to that, there are, as has been pointed out, there are additional parking spaces beyond the 37 directly in front of the library, and those are shared by the entire shopping center complex. The library does not own the 37 parking spaces. It only owns the property that the building is on, and everyone in this shopping center is free to use any part of that parking space that they want, except around the dollar store, which is yet another owner. Lighting in this particular at the main branch, lighting outside in the parking area has been insufficient. Again, because the library does not own the parking lot, they're not free to go out and put pole lamps everywhere. But between talking perhaps to the landlord and mounting lights on the side of the building facing the parking lot, that darkness, that issue of darkness in the parking area will be mitigated. Okay, in Moriches, the school district has generously offered 3 to 4 acres of property where the Little Red Schoolhouse currently is located at no charge to the library. The library intends to build a new 7,000 square foot facility behind the Little Red Schoolhouse and complete that as a modern day, highly insulated, high technology facility. The Little Red Schoolhouse would remain where it is, and at some point down the line, separate from the bond, it would be in fact renovated because it is desperate need of reworking. The Mastic Beach branch would be built in what used to be the Mastic Beach Village Hall. That building is about 4,000 square feet as it exists today, and it would be expanded to approximately 7,000 square feet by adding on to one end of it. There's approximately 50 parking spaces there, so adequate parking for the use. The entire building would be built according to modern insulation and lighting standards and energy efficiency standards, similar to Morich's, in that it would be essentially a brand new building. There's the trade journal, if you will, for the library world is called the Library Journal. It's a national publication that covers a variety of topics that are particular to libraries. And every other year, they publish a list of all the library projects in the country, both renovation and new. They list the total square footage, they list the total project costs, and they list the construction costs, because those are two different numbers. In addition to construction, there are soft costs that have to be added to develop the overall project cost. So in 2014, which we did the calculation in 2016, there were approximately 90 projects across the country in towns, in small towns in the middle of the country and on both coasts where construction costs are highest. We took all of the construction costs, localized them for Long Island, because Long Island is one of the highest construction cost areas in the country. So we have to, if you spent $100 in Springfield, Missouri, that would equate to $160 on Long Island. So we factored that in, so we got the cost of all of these libraries localized to Long Island costs. And then we added some escalation from 2014 till today, and the average cost of a library renovation or new project across the country was about $700 a square foot, which is pretty much in line with this project is coming in. In addition to library construction costs, there are a huge amount of money spent in shelving and furniture and interior IT equipment and things that you might not normally see in, let's say, a shopping center that gets built for substantially less than $700 a square foot. Sure. In New York State and in most states, when taxpayers' dollars are used to finance construction, the workers on the project need to be paid the equivalent to the what they call prevailing wage rates. Those rates are the rates established in negotiations with the trade unions in that particular area. So in Suffolk County, they take the trade union negotiated contract price for masonry or carpentry or concrete work or general labor or painting or anything else, and that's the rate that has to be paid by anybody who is working on this project. Those rates are significantly higher than the rates in the private sector, and that also raises the cost of construction.
We hope you come out and vote on December 10th at the library between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. If you need any additional information, please visit our website, www.communitylibrary.org, or call us at 631-399-1511, or just come in and visit. We have all the answers to your questions.